Hello, Maxence.
Hello.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. You are now a rising senior at UPenn's business school, Wharton, and you graduated from Ecole Jeannine Manuel in 2021. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, what languages you speak, what spécialisation you took in high school, and what you're studying now?
Yes, so my name is Maxence de. I'm indeed class of 2021 at Ecole Jeannine Manuel, which was a fantastic year. We graduated just after COVID, so we managed to skip the beauties of the back. I studied, in theory at least, mathematics, physics, and then SES, Sciences économiques et sociales in première, which was a wonderful time as well. And now I'm studying finance, entrepreneurship on the side at the Wharton School. I've continued Chinese, which I took with great enthusiasm at Ecole Jeannine Manuel. I also speak French, obviously, which is my first language, just a little bit of English, and then Spanish and Italian, which I very much enjoy speaking and learning as well. And now I'm taking classes in a bit of everything. That's the beauty of Wharton. You can take finance classes, but then build a group of classes all around it, ranging from negotiations, Chinese, or operations, decisions, and so on. So it's focused on finance, but the other half of classes are really a bit of everything.
For our young listeners who might not be familiar with Wharton, can you tell us a little bit more about your school? After all, it is apart from the College of Arts and Sciences of UPenn.
Yes, so it's people actually don't really know the name Wharton or the name University of Pennsylvania. So it is one of the 8 universities in the Ivy League. It's located in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania. And it's a little bit different. Most of the other schools are liberal arts school, as in they have one college where everybody takes classes within the same school inside of the university. For us, we can take classes in 4 different undergraduate colleges. There's the College of Arts and Sciences, there's the Wharton School of Business, there is the School of Nursing, and then there's the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. You pick one of the schools when you apply. You can have an internal transfer as well, and the majors are different from one school to the other. One of them, that one school, is your home school. That's where your major will be, and after this you can take classes in all of the other schools, meaning I took classes in physics because I was really passionate about it without it being my major, in the College of Arts and Sciences or in engineering, and it's not counting towards getting a degree for physics, but it is still something you can enjoy.
Yeah, an opportunity you can take.
It's wonderful, honestly.
Additionally, and we'll get to this later when we'll talk about your experience at Wharton and your impressions of the school, but from what I understood, there's 21 concentrations that you can...
Yes, there are secondary concentrations as well that you can only take as another one, like if you take something like retail marketing, for example, or for people who really like luxury, or who really like, who want to work for a Walmart or for TJ Maxx or something of that nature. Yes, you can take it, but it has to be in addition to something else, usually management. So there are really different groups. The biggest one, the biggest concentration is finance, is what the school is known for. People also call it the Wharton School of Finance. And that's, I guess, the specialty and what everybody does after. I think 95% of people who graduate go into either consulting or banking after graduating. So it's really focused on one thing.
And now apparently there's a bigger focus starting on entrepreneurship and tech also that you will be able to tell us more about.
Yes, this is something that they're trying to impulse. I'm not sure if they're completely there yet, but they understood that if finance ruled the world, in the end, entrepreneurs create it. So they have to have some entrepreneurs, and arguably they have the biggest of all as one of their alumni, because Elon Musk graduated from the Wharton School a few decades ago now. But that being said, they don't really have a bunch of entrepreneurs in the way Harvard or Stanford or MIT would have, so they have to start putting a big emphasis on doing this. They built a building called Tangent Hall, which I'm very much one of the top occupiers in terms of time spent there, which is basically half a football field in size, and then it's 7 stories. And it's always somewhat empty because people do not go to Penn for entrepreneurship, but it shows that this is what they're trying to impulse. It's the incubator hosted in that enormous building without it necessarily being what students try to do the most.
Before getting into the nits and grits of the application process, let's talk about your life in high school. So as you said, you took maths, physics and chemistry, which is one subject in the International Baccalaureate, which is now in our school the French International Baccalaureate, the BFI. And you also took economics and social sciences as one that you dropped in senior year in
Yes,
Terminale.
exactly.
why did you take physique chimie, which is physics and chemistry, if you knew or not that you wanted to do business? You said that you have a special interest in that you still pursue it in university. Tell us more about it.
I think studying business for the sake of studying business does not make that much sense. My personal fiber is indeed closer to entrepreneurship than it is to finance. I study finance for the technical side of it, and also because that's how I understand why someone would invest in a company I create, and it's been very helpful in the past. But I think that having a technical foundation as a general tool to use in your creation is something that's really important. It's easier to figure out the business side knowing the technical side of what you're creating than the other way around, and that is why I was focusing on it. The same way, I also had a passion for physics, especially quantum mechanics. It's very niche, but that's the field that I like the most, that I always continue to pursue. I was also taking the further math option, expert math, in the French baccalaureate system, and there are two extra programs that I was participating in after classes with two professors at the school, which were, I don't know exactly how they're called now. One is like advanced math and the other one is advanced physics, which we had the opportunity to do with some university professors who would visit EJM, and we would be 10 of them in a room or in one of the labs in the S building, and just learning about concepts that you normally don't really learn in the French program, and that is something I really liked. So that's why I continued taking classes for physics when I was at the University of Pennsylvania, thanks to that college and Wharton system as well. But it's really because I want to understand things, and in order to be able to create something, you have to understand how the world works.
That's exactly what I wanted to ask you about the advanced physics, or Physique Plus,
yeah.
that might be called like this. Is it during the last years of high school? Can you tell us a little bit more, because I've actually never heard of this, unlike Math Expert, which is, I think, more common. Math
Expert is part of the bac system, so it's one of the official options. Physique Plus and Math Plus were run by professors who were, I don't know exactly what the arrangement with the school was, but it was after we were done with classes. So I took those in seconde, in première, while we were on campus, which wasn't the case because of COVID from March onwards. And then in terminale, that's not something that was offered either. But during COVID, one of the projects I was working on, which I don't know if some people who were involved are still at the school, but it was called the Bilingue Business Review, where a lot of the classes we managed to organize ourselves, because the school obviously was trying to keep up with us being fully online. We organized some Math Plus classes, some office hours as well, but some Physique Plus classes, and it was a bit more open in terms of everyone being able to attend directly. So that was a very nice opportunity for anyone who wanted to show up instead of being bored at home watching Netflix.
It sounds like you did a lot of extracurriculars in addition to your classes, which I must say you had 18 of average, so that was not a problem, especially that in the US our grades are converted to A's and B's, and after a 16 it's considered A+, so I wouldn't say it's very overwhelming, but extracurriculars do also matter. Did you, for example, participate or win any Olympiads, competitions?
So I did not participate in the Olympiads or competitions, other than I was part of EPA, Entreprendre pour Apprendre, which is Junior Achievement as a worldwide organization. And that is where we participated in a bunch of competitions. Actually, we won the contest for Île-de-France. We were second in France. The first ones actually did not qualify for some reason, so we went to the Euro competition as well, where we won, I think, best website and best marketing, which was great. We had a person on the team who was really, really good at the marketing subject. She goes to Stern now, by the way, so we are still close and collaborating on certain subjects. And so that's a bit the non-academic side. I didn't really participate in academic competitions apart from the usual concours kangourou, drôle de maths, stuff like this. I did decent on a bunch of them. I think I did second one year at kangourou, which was a great pride and honor. I don't know how that happens, but I was terrible all the other years. So I don't know exactly how that came to be, but that was a wonderful experience.
In all of France?
In France, yeah.
Very impressive. And what about volunteering work? Did you do those or mention on your application?
I did a little bit of it, to be completely fair. Some of what I started before COVID didn't continue during the period of time. I was not in Paris. I was far away. It's something that I was doing a lot of it at a church which is close to where I'm living and close to the school also actually, but it's I guess not something to spend a lot of time, to each his own in terms of what people do in terms of volunteering. I encourage people because there's a massive sense of gratification even from a personal standpoint of doing it, and you meet wonderful people who sometimes have had life trajectories that are completely different than yours, and being able to spend some time with them, share dinner with them, exchange with them, understand how their life started and unfolded to come to where they are, and how they can find a path to continue to a place where they're now stable and better and find an exit to that situation, is something that I recommend everybody does. It gives you a new perspective on the world, especially when we go to a school on EJN where we aren't necessarily exposed to such questions.
What about research projects or opportunities you might have had during high school?
I have never been a very academically driven person in the sense of pure research and math or physics or stuff of that nature. I enjoy understanding the topics just out of curiosity, but pushing the boundaries for the sake of knowledge is something that I respectfully, but is not necessarily my drive. I'm more of a creative person, I guess.
So would I assume that the academic side of, for example, summer schools or summer programs is the same as research?
Yes and no. That's a good question. I did participate in 2019, over the summer of 2019. I was accepted to a program at Stanford University. So they have multiple programs on campus over the summer. One is a 3-week program that is on campus and is the most known one. I went to the one that's a bit more niche, where it's for their general student population. They have classes over the summer, especially it was right before the supposed date of the Tokyo Olympics, so a lot of athletes were taking classes over the summer, and they open 150 spots, I think, to high schoolers who are joining the classes with the same professors and with the same students who normally take classes throughout the year. And it's being able to participate in this, it lasts the entire quarter, so 8 weeks. And it is a humbling experience, but also a wonderful one because you understand what it's like to spend time there. And that's probably where I got an idea of what it's like to study in the US and how different it is from studying in France.
And you got to have this experience already, if my math is right, in seconde, right?
In the summer between seconde and première.
Right, so when you were a rising junior.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, standardized testing is a big factor in the applications too. So you took the SAT and you scored 1520 on them.
Yes.
How did you prepare for them?
I was taking the wonderful classes that we have offered at our school to prepare for the SAT, and we were taking it August 29th, so at the end of the summer. So preparing over the summer, it's mostly what I feel helps the most, although I certainly did not get the best score in the world, and I think I would have taken it a second time if someone is applying to the US. That's definitely what I recommend doing if you get a 1520, just to be on the safer side. But the best strategy, I think, is to take actual tests, to time yourself with the exact same breaks, with the exact same time, to wake up at the same time as well, because it's very different when you're doing it at 7 a.m. than when you're doing it at 2 p.m. So put yourself in conditions that are as realistic as possible and take it in that situation. That is the only real way of you getting better. And then one piece of advice that actually helped me a lot is circle the questions where you guess, to remember that even if when you correct them, you see that they're correct. If you guessed, make sure that next time you still remember how to do that. So that's one thing. Some people say actually don't guess when you are, like, at all, leave them blank. When you are not on the real test, do guess on the real test, but when you're taking a practice test, do not guess such that you remember that there was this specific question you don't know. So that's a little very niche tip that actually helps for these few extra points you want to get.
And prepare in the same conditions as close, especially if you did it in August, it wasn't in the school, so it was probably...
It was actually.
Oh, maybe because it was the end of summer, so you could do it there. And if you took the school program, it took you a few years, right, to prepare. Did you start in troisième?
Yeah, I took, I think, 2 years of it. To be honest, it gets quite redundant at some point. But it's true that the professor heading this, I don't know if he changed, but he had a saying which was, it's always the same test over and over again. And it's true, they just changed the numbers, they changed the topic, but the questions are always of the same nature. So it is a good thing in a way, retrospectively, that it gets redundant, because that's how you get good at it, by just being able to do the questions without thinking about them.
But it's true that it is particular to only be able to do it once, which also is...
Honestly, it doesn't matter how many times you do it as long as you get the score you want. And I would recommend getting like 1550 or above. And then when you're in the zone of 1550 and above, it doesn't make any kind of difference to be at a 1580 or at 1550.
The essays are also a big factor in the applications, the Common App one, but also the supplementals. How long did it take you to write it? From the draft to the brainstorming?
That's a big question, because to be fully transparent, as you know, there's the early action system, which I participated in. So you always work a lot for your early action and cross your fingers hoping that you get in and that you don't have to work for a bunch of other universities. So I crammed quite a bit during the Christmas holidays right before a regular decision, because I got deferred from my first early action at Yale. So the answer is I didn't spend as much time as I maybe should have. I started working on my main essay the beginning of the summer though, which was a very good idea that the school forces you to do, but that's a great thing because you need time to think about it, to get new ideas, to think of a new way to present things, of the topic that might not be exactly right, and then you want to find something that might be better. It improves by giving it time, by having different drafts, by having different ideas, by pondering, and by erasing and starting again, and erasing and starting again.
That's already very good advice, but I wanted to ask you, because the school does give you help with, for example, Miss Chase, who guides you during the summer. And I wanted to ask for your advice for the people listening, how to use this help and time most efficiently.
The help you get from Miss Chase, at least in my time, is very tailored to one thing, which is making sure it's well written. It's not necessarily the topic. It's not necessarily tailoring it to what the schools, the colleges want to see. It's not necessarily finding the little details where the school is going to say, well, this is a student perfect for me. It's really about the way it's presented. Like, is it acceptable writing in terms of the way it is sent? Because she's an expert at writing, and that is her role, that is her job. So that's why I recommend to really, really spend some time on the side of ideas, to do your research and to leverage that resource as late as you can, provided that you've done all the work before to have the ideas you want to put on paper. She will be great to help you put everything in writing if you can communicate effectively on ideas that you are certain are the correct ones.
Absolutely. Be ready to present your ideas that she might even, of course, you know, you have the opportunity to ask her opinion on the topics.
Yes.
But be ready and have it.
She has seen 1,000 essays over her life, so she knows which ones are good and which ones are bad.
There's a list of prompts that you can answer for the Common App essay. If you don't mind saying, which one did you choose?
So I took the one about a personal challenge. I'm not completely certain about the exact wording because it changes slightly from year to year, but it is about explaining what personal challenge you faced, how you overcame it, what is the backstory to it, and how it defines who you are today and who you want to be, more importantly to the school, who you want to be tomorrow.
Would you mind saying a little bit, unless it's very
No, of course. And the redemption story is actually even better. My big issue is that I was extremely shy. I had a complete inability to speak, to exchange with people when I was a kid. The first line is about me speaking to myself in my head, going to the bakery with my €2 coin in hand, having to buy a baguette on a Sunday morning, and repeating my line, preparing to ask the person for a baguette, and just entering the bakery, slamming my coin on the table and just going, bread! And that is something that I still have in mind today, and that haunts me because it's exactly what happened, and I've always been terrified, and I was, especially at that point, of interactions with adults and human interactions and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if it's the way I was made at the time or I am made in general, but it's only through practice and through putting myself in positions I didn't really want to be in that I managed to have an average ability at expressing myself, and that then I explained was very crucial in the role for Pet Plants, which is the company we created for junior achievement. And after this, I had a bunch of speaking opportunities in public, which from junior achievement and from the school, which contributed to the redemption arc of being able to stand in front of 900 people and deliver a speech.
It is a challenge that many people face, and that is essential to
Practice.
overcome, like you say.
Practice. That's the one thing. And it's terrifying, but do it.
It will come up either way in life. And for example, the interviews, I know it's a hard aspect of the application. If some people have it, some people don't. Did you?
So I had interviews for almost every school. What is said though about the interviews is that they cannot help you. They're only a way to screen for real red flags, where the school would say, or the interviewer would say, okay, there is a clear red flag about this person, it's XYZ. It's because it's not a way for them that can be relied on, in the sense that it's not fair. Every interview is going to be different. Someone who graduated in the 1980s and who's had a career and interviewed people for a hiring process is completely different than the person who graduated last year and your first interviewee. And they're going to say, oh, this person is wonderful, blah, 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 just because they're comparing you to who they were when they were applying a few years ago. So it's not an objective metric. But if there is a clear red flag like, oh, this person, I don't know, is insulted me during the meeting, of course you're not going to be able to make it onto the final review round and being accepted.
So is it only when they're not really sure about the applicant?
No, they do it for, I think they do it for all the people they can do it for. Sometimes they just don't have enough interviewers, but when they do, I think they try to do it for everyone, because why wouldn't they?
And if your memory, is nice, but it's true that it's hard to remember, what kind of questions did they ask you?
It's very general. It's getting to know you. As in, it's not going to be a technical question. It's not going to be a question about solve this math problem or some Google hiring question that could have showed up in an actual hiring interview. It's really focused on a chat and getting to know you. And from their perspective, it's answering the question, would I like to spend some time with this person? It's so one thing that I learned at Wharton actually is that the question that's usually asked of interviewers to think about when they're interviewing someone is, would you like, or would it be okay for you to be stuck at an airport with a flight canceled with that person? Having to figure out the hotel and maybe sharing a room for the night and having to figure out the problems and still having a good time. And if the answer to that question is yes, then not only congratulations, you're a likable person, but beyond this, it means that you're someone who brings something to the table, who has some level of conversation, of discussion that is interesting enough, and you're also, as a person, resourceful enough that you are someone who the university is going to want to claim in the end. That's the key theme. If you're presenting yourself, or if you're applying to a university, you need to give them an answer to the question, are you going to become the best in the world in your field? Are you someone that they're going to want to claim when in 40 years you become the world expert in whichever subject you want to study?
And for that, they will need to like your personality, want to hear your thoughts, your ideas, your perspective on the world, on your discipline. Absolutely.
Yes. Well, it's part of being successful in that sense, in the sense that is the answering the what's in it for the school when they're reviewing your application. They know that you have more chances of being successful at what you venture in if you are a likable person and someone who's also formidable, in the sense of you cannot be stopped. If you have an idea in mind, you just push and do it. And this, even if the interview is a moment where you are talking about general ideas and you're not really taking action on something, is something that I feel generally you can get a sense of when you're talking to someone.
And this human side is a very interesting specificity of the US applications.
Yes,
it's what Madame
for
Dabad
sure.
told us when she was telling us about the Common App essay, and she said, when people are wondering, should I brag about something? Should I tell them about my extracurriculars or about a certain university? It's really to make the person who is reading, so the admissions officer, want to go have coffee with you.
Exactly.
Talk to you as a person, as a friend.
Exactly. So bragging for the sake of bragging is going to be cataclysmic. Show some vulnerability. In the end, it's part of who you are. Maybe there's something that you aren't good at. Well, you can mention it. Just to say that you want to get better at it and that, I don't know, it's one of your goals for college to fix X specific issue.
How did you approach asking for recommendation letters, which is also another one of the factors? How would you advise people to go about it? Who to ask? Who did you ask, for example?
I asked my physics teacher and my English teacher for these two recommendation letters. I think it helps to ask for these letters to professors whose subject you're really passionate in. And what I really liked about English classes is when we were studying Shakespeare, for example, or A Streetcar Named Desire, or Cry the Beloved Country, or Beloved, or all these works, we had very, very different views on the works with the professor. And obviously she's the professor, so she knew a lot more than I did, but it had to be explained to me rather than me just taking notes down and saying, okay, I'm not trying to understand and let's just put this down. But I feel like being engaged in the class, asking questions, genuine questions that come out of I'm trying to understand rather than I want to be seen as the kid who's participating in class, and then having a proper discussion where you are able to say, well, this is my idea, I'm defending my idea, here are my arguments for my idea. Professors, this shows them that you have a real interest in their subject, and that even if you disagree, you are taking it seriously. Same thing for physics, where obviously there is right and there is wrong in physics, but if you ask further questions by trying to understand out of genuine curiosity, the professor is going, first of all, they're going to have things to say about you, which isn't a given always when you're asking someone for a recommendation letter. If you're only participating in class, handing in your homework, they will say, well, very good students, homework always very neat, tidy, and with the right answers. Is that what you want to have in your letter? Maybe you want to have something that goes beyond, something that shows a little unorthodoxy in the way you are in the classroom, because that is what people are looking for. One word that Ivy League schools and colleges of that level usually mention is the word quirky, as in having very strong interest in one subject to the point where it can be a bit weird or unusual, but in a good way, in a way that your passion is so strong that you don't really care about what people think about it. It just transpires out of you being able to say, I really like that subject and I'm going to pursue it.
Do you need to do projects outside of class with these teachers in order for them to have something to say?
Not necessarily. I mean, it probably did help that I was doing Physique Plus, for example, which was interesting, but for English, I don't have a feeling that I was going to the Globe every weekend to watch Shakespeare.
Is it better to choose a teacher with whom you have the best grades or with whom you have the best relationship? Because it's not always the same person.
The teacher who has stuff to say about you. Like, again, if you are going to a professor where you have wonderful grades and they say you're a wonderful student, that may help. Everybody who is applying to Harvard or Stanford or Penn or MIT is a wonderful student. So you being a wonderful student does not change anything. They want to hear where you're, one, it's a given that you're a wonderful student, and why beyond this you bring something else. So going to a professor who you have a great relationship with and hopefully also good grades is normally where you're going to have the most productive letter. And thank them later because they really help.
Absolutely. It's a lot of work and time, especially because it's very specific. It's about the person and it takes time. Did you have additional recommendation letters? Maybe people with whom you did research, like professors?
I do not believe so. No, I only had the two required ones and the one from the head counselor at the school.
So you mentioned how UPenn, Wharton wasn't the first, the school you applied to early decision. It was Yale. Can you tell us more about how you went about with this decision? Yeah,
so first of all, in retrospect, knowing that I'm going to Wharton now, maybe I would have done things differently. Because Wharton, because it's an early decision process, accepts 60, 70%, I don't have the exact numbers, but I think it's 60, 70% of their entire class during the early decision process, meaning the regular decision process is a bit more competitive, a lot more competitive. So I applied restrictive early action at Yale, which is non-binding if you get in, because it was a bet for the same reasons that Wharton wasn't really a bet, but was fitting me, which is that Yale is really trying to develop their entrepreneurial side as well. So if you're able to show that you are going to bring something to their entrepreneurship division, and if in addition to this you have a passion for philosophy, for language, for English in the same way that I do, I think there was something to be said about applying with that angle of saying, look, I am a general good fit for Yale, but I have this little edge over all the people who have this interest in language that I can help in the same way that I can put to the contribution of developing the entrepreneurial side of Yale. And hopefully, it's also something that I think they look for, even though I was not successful at Yale, so take this with a grain of salt. I think they look for people who are able to get people together to do stuff, which I tried to do under the entrepreneurial side of saying, well, if I'm with a CS person and an economics person and a person who's great at writing, that may be a team that is going to be great for the technical side, the marketing side, and the accounting side, for example, of the company. And having this angle of entrepreneurship and going into a place where it's not necessarily what they are looking for when you think of it intuitively is actually something that I thought was a good angle to try. Did not work. Again, there are so many unknowns that you can't really know why you get in or not for any school for that matter.
And a lot of other top schools don't give the opportunity to study business in your bachelor degree in undergraduate, which is something that Wharton does and many others don't.
Yeah, so the schools that do this mostly have a dedicated school inside of the university, a dedicated college inside of the university. It's the case for the Stern School of Business at NYU, for Haas at Berkeley, or for all the other schools that have this same system. But at the highest level of top 10 universities, I think it's, yes, relatively rare in the sense that Berkeley and Penn are the only two that have these dedicated colleges inside the university. MIT as well.
Did you communicate with Wharton or other universities? If, for example, I know now that you applied early action to Yale, for example, asking questions, sending emails, often it's something that is recommended to establish a relationship before applying. Is that something, or maybe even visiting the campuses? So
visiting the campuses was difficult, first of all, because it's very far. Second, also because of COVID. The only campus that I had visited quite well was Stanford, because I literally had been a student there for 2 months, for an entire quarter. So that is the only place where I had a really good sense of what it was. But no, when I arrived to Wharton, I had never set foot even in Philadelphia or Pennsylvania at all. So it was a great unknown. In terms of researching the schools, yes, I spent quite a bit of time to watch YouTube videos to find as good information as I was able to find. It's true also that at the time it wasn't really as easy to find information specifically about the school, especially tailored to you. If you watch a YouTube video, it's tailored to whoever is showing you their day in the life. So it's not really built for the person who is watching it directly.
If you don't mind saying, do you have a legacy at Wharton?
No. No. Both of my parents, so my mother was one of the first women to go to business school in France. My dad did not go to college. He went to HEC, but much later in his career for an executive MBA. All my family members are French, again, and it's not necessarily something that was expected of me well ahead to go to school in the US. So I really did not have any kind of advantages in the way that people who have a really good connection, even without being a legacy, even like people who have a good understanding of what the college system is, that's not something that was my case at all when applying there.
And it is important to mention because in other countries it doesn't work the way it does in the US, where legacy does have, a big importance in the application process.
Yeah.
And even without the legacy, perhaps did you know some alumni from Wharton or some students that you could ask questions to, have guidance?
I got in touch with one student from EGM from the year above me over the summer before going. So after I was already committed to that system. Talking to students is really, really helpful and is something that I recommend doing, but it's not easy to do because usually the people on the other end actually don't really know what to tell you about. Like they've been there doing their life and out of nowhere you have a list of questions that's falling on your lap. It's kind of a weird thing, especially if multiple people do it.
And considering that people who are accepted themselves do not know what is the thing that
they have no idea. And I have no idea how I got in, to be honest. And it's also part of the beauty of the process is like you throw a dice and hopefully it works. But I don't know. I have no idea. I wouldn't be able to. I can tell you what it's like to attend Penn. I can tell you what it's like to build a file that gets in every time for sure.
And if you had to, make a guess, even though of course you cannot know, what do you think made you stand out the most in your application at Wharton?
I think one of my activities, the Bingham Business Review, which I mentioned, got quite a bit of traction. So in terms of pure numbers and meeting the benchmark for grades and activities, I think that contributed quite a bit. I also do think that activities and academics are all about ticking a box, reaching a certain level, where anything beyond that, unless it's really stellar, is not going to make that much of a change, especially if you come from France where you're not competing against hundreds of people. You're really against the other people at EJM and in some of the few other schools who are sending people. So it could be, what made the real difference could be the essays, could be the supplementals. I think, and that's something that requires a lot of research, but I think that what really contributes well is thinking what's in it for the school. As in, instead of thinking how do I build a file that's objectively good, that they look at and say, well, this file is clearly better than this file in the ether in general. It's really looking from the perspective of the school and saying, what do they want? It just so happens that when you're Wharton, you have this prestige and fame because you're able to say, well, Elon Musk was my student, the CEO of Google was my student, the CEO of Microsoft was my student, Donald Trump, think whatever you want of him, but he did decent in life. He was their student as well. Warren Buffett was their student. And they cannot miss the next Elon Musk or the next CEO of Google or Microsoft. Like, they have to be Wharton students for Wharton to continue its legacy. So there is something here that they want. And if you're able to show them, well, look, with this amount of resources, I was able to do all of this. And now with these resources that you will be giving me, and you can tick them directly and explaining which ones, with these resources you will be giving me, there's no doubt I will become the best in the world in my field. And when you say this and demonstrate it in a very rational way, very direct way, and explaining why it's really the stepping stone to you becoming the best, they cannot refuse you at the end. Because it is, I wouldn't say blackmailing, but it's saying, do you want some other school to be able to claim me? Well, no. They need to be able to claim you if you're the next Elon Musk.
So you would say this is the thing that they are looking for in a student, what Wharton looks for?
Yeah, so one precision, I do not think I will be the next Elon Musk. The odds of this are very slim, but I'm saying this as a general rule of how I think you should approach the process, having helped quite a few people do this as well. So that's, I guess, the angle to take it under, because it is the what's in it for them. So it's all about making your application subjectively better in the eyes of that school, as opposed to objectively better, which is better in general. If you cured cancer at age 15, that's wonderful, but Wharton can't do anything with you. It's not like they're not going to help you to become the best neurosurgeon or something of that nature. So they will take the guy who was president of a finance class instead. And that's just, like, it's objectively better to be the one who cured cancer, but it's also subjectively better in the eyes of Wharton to be specialized in finance.
So they can be able to give you something and offer you, and you will be able to do that in return. Because, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, of course, from what I understood is that Wharton also has like a separate application with like additional questions that are specific to them.
Yes, so all the schools, all the top ones have the writing supplements where they have questions that only they see when you answer them.
And I was wondering, there's a few that I wrote down from, people sharing what they are. Maybe they're not those, and maybe if you remember some others, you can tell us. But I was wondering if you could answer, for example, there's the question of why Wharton.
That's exactly, as I was explaining, I think the answer should start with what's your vision for what you want to do in life. Because there's no reason you would go to Wharton other than to achieve a goal. My goal is to revolutionize finance, to make it more green, or to make it more like this or XYZ. And then, because of that reason, why is Wharton the necessary stepping stone for you to get there? And the reason, the final goal, has to be something that they can believe in based on what you've already been able to do, which they see in the rest of your application. But it's also something that has to be interesting to them in the sense of, yes, this is someone we really want to be able to claim. And do we have the ability to train that person to become who they want to be? And you have to show specifically the atmosphere of X class I'm going to take sophomore year with Professor Z is something that is tailored specifically to preparing me for consulting in that domain. And it's true. If you ask a Wharton kid specifically, they will tell you, I can tell you, well, if you have homework that is specifically copied on what you will be doing at McKinsey or whichever consulting company you do, because it is about taking a problem and then building a solution and thinking about it and creating a slide deck and presenting it as if you were presenting it to a client. That is the training you receive. It's not liberal arts. So if someone wants to write a book after, yes, it's not going to be the perfect training. But if you want to become CEO of McKinsey, yes, that is what corresponds. So you have to go in a level of detail that is actually quite astonishing to show the school, look, I've done my research. There is no doubt you are the place for me and I'm the person for you.
So this is what Wharton can offer you. What did you think you could contribute to Wharton when you were applying? I
mean, the angle of entrepreneurship, as we discussed, is, I think, one of the big ones, because Wharton wants entrepreneurs, but also they're not necessarily the place where entrepreneurs go. So there is an edge here that if you're an entrepreneur that ticks the boxes, you can leverage. And if you are applying under the angle of I'm a finance person, great. And again, as I said, they need to be able to claim you if you become the best, but it's more difficult because you're competing against more finance people. If you're taking the angle of entrepreneurship and then saying, well, I actually also speak XYZ languages. I speak Chinese. I'm going to be able to go to China and open a new market there. Or I have this passion for physics where I'm able to bring both the technical side and the business side. And if you teach me XYZ, I'm going to be able to create this crazy company or whatever. I'm not saying that this is what I said, but I'm saying that this is the general approach to how I think you should present yourself, if not sell yourself to the school. And in a way, yes, people don't want to be selling themselves, but if everybody else is doing this, you kind of have to.
And it is an American thing to do it.
It is a very American thing. Applying to a US school with a French mindset is not going to get you anywhere.
So you did have past experiences with business and finance in high school, like you said, with Entreprendre pour apprendre.
Yes.
But what made you want to study business and finance? What motivated you?
It's also still through the lens of entrepreneurship. I'm really focusing on, so inside finance, obviously we have different tracks. The one I'm taking right now is called private equity and venture capital. So it's really focusing on the entrepreneurial side of finance, as in taking nothing and placing the capital that helps turn it into something. The way I'm approaching it is also I'm going to Wharton, which is a wonderful school for finance. I would be dumb not to study finance if I go there, but also finance under the twist that makes it relevant to me. I know I want to be creating companies. I know I want to put my technical side to contribution. I need to understand why someone would invest or would not invest into anything that I create. And having this financial background in order to make my company financially appealing to anyone who would be willing to create a company or to create a fund rather and invest in something that I would create with a congregation of people from Wharton who are also excellent at business is something that I think is a good case for studying that subject when you go there.
I know you have a project, Certitude,
yes,
that you would like to tell our listeners about.
Yes, so I mean, it's, I think, driven by the same reason that you are doing this podcast, which is bring something you would have liked to see yourself and that wasn't existing and that you decided to create. So I was explaining a second ago how I think that applying to college is better done by placing yourself in the shoes of the university, looking at the answer of what works, which tells you what they're interested in, and then creating, tailoring, presenting your application such that it looks interesting to them. We created Certitude as the first company that does this. So we are bringing together humans and a lot of data, where we use obviously machine learning and a lot of very modern techniques to make sure that we understand a lot of application data at scale. We take thousands of real data points from previous applications for all the schools you can think of, at least in the top 60 in the US, applications that were accepted, applications that were rejected. We trained our own machine learning model on this, and then we plugged I know AI agents are very fashionable today, but we plugged one into that model, and now you can ask it questions. So send your entire application. It's going to say, well, based on us reviewing 1,000 data points from previous years, if you shaped your essay in a way where the transition showcases that you are a doer, for example, Wharton is going to be a little bit more impressed by this, and this has worked in X 100 applications before, and not doing this has not worked for X 100 applications at the other time. This only works though if you're able to do what I was mentioning with showing these specific resources at the school that are going to be relevant to you. So what we also do, and that's the human side of the company, is that we have a network of 500, we call them student experts, who are specifically trained current students like me going to the top 50, top 60 universities in the US, and who know exactly how to research the right information for you and how to give it to you in such a way that you understand what to put forward in your application. And the beauty of it is that this happens on a Zoom call, that the entire transcript of the Zoom is then plugged into your AI context directly. And when you ask it a question, you can converse as if you were talking to the people who go to that place, trained on thousands of real data points, and your entire application is plugged into it. And things are working relatively well so far. We got people into all Ivies, into Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, NYU, and a bunch of wonderful schools last application cycle, and we have about 1,400 people applying with us this current round.
The people you're working with, that I imagine, you know, people who code, people who are working like with the students individually, you were able to meet them at UPenn, at Wharton? So
my wonderful co-founder is a Wharton student as well. She is specializing in marketing and she's very good at it. And that is mostly the core team. It's her and I am the one doing the code for now, but we do have 5-6 other people, it varies quite a bit, who are doing each one thing that they're really, really good at. For example, we have people who have a lot of connection in one specific field. We have a senior advisor who is the CEO of a $5 billion company doing data for universities, so he knows that field extremely well as well. We have one of our friends who is also a coder but specializing in data specifically and how to handle it, which is much beyond my abilities, so this is something that we delegate to him directly. And then we have ambassadors in about 70 different high schools, including EJM, by the way, where these people are presenting what we're doing to the different people. So everybody has a clear job, and this, I think, is how we're able to bring everybody together to create a project bigger than the sum of its parts.
Coding is a great skill right now to have. Were you able to take classes in coding?
I never took a coding class, no.
But you just did it on your own, trying out things when you were in high school? ChatGPT
is actually quite impressive at doing stuff. There is one thing, which is that it never works the first time. So you actually start by trying to understand what the problem is, and trying to understand what the problem is slowly gives you an understanding of how it works. And over time, after 2 weeks, a month of working tirelessly on one coding project, it's maybe not going to be working, but at least you're going to understand why it's not working, and slowly you're going to see how you can solve the different issues. So for now, that is how we have built our platform.
Can you tell us more about the gap year that you took to do this project and other things, I can imagine? So
that is mostly what I've been focusing on during the year, because we raised a round of funding in March of 2023, which is what really launched the company. At the beginning, we were only selling to other companies. So we're not here to solely say we're going to replace counselor or everything. Actually, the people we work the best with are school counselors, who then have the ability to see, this person has this much progress, they're doing this, they're working on their essay, they're working on XYZ, and they can see the advice as well that we're giving. So that is how we really developed over that year, is by talking to professionals who are good, as I said, at making your application objectively better, because they've seen a lot of applications, but they do not have the perspective of one specific school. We then tailor the application to make you go from the top 50% that are considered to the top 3% who end up getting in. And the way we do it is literally retro engineering the answer. We take what worked and what didn't, we understand it, the model understands it, and then we apply the learnings to your own file.
If you don't mind going a little bit back to your personal application process, which I'm sure is where you got the idea for your project, how did the logistics of doing a gap year work? Did Wharton accept you knowing that you weren't going to come the first year? So
I took my gap year after 3 semesters at Wharton, which means that I actually spent time developing the first stones of the company in November, December of 2022, even though it was completely different, completely separate. It was a whole other company actually at the time, and it wasn't really directly linked, but it was kind of in the same field. And I initially took a gap year for this specific project, and then after sometimes it wasn't really going in the direction we wanted it to go. So that is where I started working on Certitude and focusing my time more fully on this. We got incorporated, I think, April 1st, 2023, which means that with the funding round and everything falling into place, we're able to dedicate a lot more time. So now I just completed actually my 4th semester at Wharton, which means that I'm a rising junior and not a rising senior, as I said at the beginning, but that's fine. But all my friends who I started Wharton with are, exactly, a year above myself.
Now that you have expertise in the subject of applications, when would you advise students to start thinking about where they want to apply, working on their profile?
The ace in the sleeve of those who do the best are, one, you are the son of a legacy or a big donor. That's one thing that is completely separate. But a big advantage is starting very, very early, especially now that you are, unless you have the back, you are on holiday. And if you are on holiday, you have an amount of time right now that you will not have starting in September. So have everything sorted as early as you can. Also spend time talking to people, meeting with people. The students are more available now after, like in the evening after an internship. They don't necessarily have homework, whereas during the year they will be with their friends on campus and busy on other things. So get your pieces together right now. Make sure that you start building every little detail of your application. And the cool thing is that if you figure out that there is something that is missing and that could be useful in your application, an activity, a test, for example, or an award you would like to run for or something of that nature, you still have time to do it. If you wake up in September and realize that you don't have anything on your application, that is where even for the best of advisors, no one will be able to do anything for you.
Did you win any awards? For example, our school awards?
Yes, I won the Jeannine Manuel Award 3 times, and that's it.
In the last 3 years of high school. So what grade was it for you when you started?
It was, I think, same in the summer before applying to university. So I had my list already more or less in mind, although it was still getting refined. And I started working on my essay. I started working on how I was going to present the pieces of the application that remain the same. In August, the universities release the supplemental questions, the writing supplements. So at that point, you kind of have to wait for that to be published to be able to work on it. But for everything that stays the same, as in how you're going to present your activities or something like that, start as early as possible. Do yourself a service. The other thing is, the number one piece of advice in applying to college is that you're not going to get in if you do not like the school itself, if you're not fully convinced that this is a place where you want to dedicate a lot of time and energy to be able to get in. So you have to be extremely hyped about it, and normally you would be you would feel interested enough early on that you actually don't have to force yourself to be working on that application. You would be doing it out of interest, out of passion, out of being able to show your best self to the place you really want to convince is the right fit for you.
So now that you have been at the school for quite some time, what are your impressions of Wharton?
Only good things or also bad things? We could do a bit of both. It's the good things are obviously that it's absolutely insane, and I'm very, very grateful to go there. The classes are at Wharton, so not the entire university, but the classes at Wharton are about 500 people total per year, which is very intimate. You get to know everybody very soon. The good side of it is that you can make friends very quickly, and you are all in the same classes all the time. The flip side is that, and this happens quite a bit, you are also always with the same people, and a lot of people in Wharton tend to not branch out to the other classes, to the other schools. So that is one thing that can be sometimes a hindrance to us mixing with people who do different things, especially because the Wharton mindset is very, very different from the rest of Penn. People who go to Wharton are there because they are, as a general rule, the 500 sharkiest people in the world of that given age group. And when you put the 500 of them together, the melting pot can be quite explosive at times. And when you go in a class, sometimes like people will really go to quite surprising lengths in order to secure a Goldman internship over the other person who was known to be their friend, on paper at least. And it can sometimes be quite daunting. That's why I like spending more time with philosophy majors or people doing math or people doing something where we're not really necessarily competing. And also as someone who's not necessarily going against the finance nerds for all these top internships and stuff like that, I think it's a bit more appeased of a relationship.
I'm sure you don't regret going to Wharton and being accepted there, but I wanted to ask you also about the schools that you applied to, which weren't only in the US. Could you tell us more about them?
So I also applied to, the usuals, the Harvards, Princetons, Yale, Stanford, MIT, where I don't think anyone has gotten to MIT from EJM for the last 20-something years. So that's a hate-hate relationship between the school and them, but whatever. So yeah, I applied to all these schools, and again, I think the game is the game, and I ended up being accepted to Wharton, and so this is the place that I de facto went to. I also was accepted to a few other schools like USC with the Marshall School of Business, to Babson, to Northeastern. I'm still waitlisted at Harvard, so hopefully I'll hear back from them at some point. If someone is watching, I'd love to get an answer, but whatever. And no, so the other schools I did not get a positive result, but that's also how you learn, I guess. And that's just life. And it also answers the question of, can you get into every single Ivy? I don't think a lot of people do it. It's a question of fit. It's a question of what you want to do. People who want to spend more time thinking about ideas are probably a better fit for Yale and Princeton. People who like to spend time actually doing stuff are probably a better fit for Penn. That's how things end up. I'm very happy at Penn, so I guess the choice made itself. And that's life, and we continue and enjoy every single moment of being on that campus.
Looking back on your time at Ecole Jeannine Manuel, who would you say was your favorite teacher?
So I really liked Monsieur Descasses, who I don't know if he's watching, but I really like his classes. I really liked the fact that they actually did not really feel like classes. They were more of a conversation, I guess, between him and us as the students. And it's a philosophy class, so I guess that is the right way to do it. And he never made us feel like we were wrong just because he was the professor. He would always bring an argument, question what we were doing, and God knows that we were always disagreeing on just almost everything. And having the possibility to ask a question and to have him explain why I was wrong or why my idea was something that wasn't necessarily working or why XYZ is, I think, the best way to learn. In the sense that if a professor just says, no, you're wrong, I'm the professor, you get into this difficult situation where you don't want to actually ask questions, and then you just resort to learning stuff by heart instead of really understanding what is going on. So Mr. Descasses made us really love the subject and want to push further in terms of gaining an understanding beyond what was just in the program, really liking philosophy. And that, I think, is a really good strength for a professor.
There's no better way to describe Mr. Descasses' classes, and I had the great chance to have him this year in HLP and absolutely loved it. What is your dream job?
I do not know exactly what the name would be for it, and it does sound a little cliche, okay? But I feel like anywhere where I can solve problems with a measurable impact is something that I really enjoy to be able to do. I think there are two scales at which you can do this. One is at the scale of the individual, as in solving problems for people, which I believe is done through business. Another one is the scale of societies at large, which are the ways people are organized, obviously, but it's not the same to impact a country than it is to impact every single person of that country individually. I think this is done more through politics. If I could find a way to bring both together, or to do one and the other after, and to have an impact, hopefully for good and for the best, and in changing the world, which I think needs quite a bit of change. I'm not saying I'm the best person to do it, but I will certainly do my best to try to do it. That is the path that I hope to be able to go to, as long as I'm able to bring a solution to the problems that are on the table, and that people see it as a good for the world and for the future generations.
What is your definition of success?
I think success is, I think it's very personal to everyone. I also think it's not something that it's usually measured in terms of the magnitude of what you're able to do. I think you can find success and meaning for success, or the meaning of success, in the big things as much as you can in the little things. If you spent a night coding and at 5:30 a.m. your code works, that is success. If you spend your life trying to build something that will transform the world and it works in the end, that is also success. This is an obvious definition. Mr. Descasses would call it a nice la palissade, and I fully agree with him. But it's also in this kind of simple definition that we can find meaning. If you go to a convoluted answer about what success is, as I know many podcasts, not this one, do to get a lot of views on Instagram, I think you can lose yourself into meaningless definitions of, oh, you have achieved the fact of having a lot of money or doing this, blah, 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 because you are looking at the metrics a little too much. I think success is having a goal that is clearly defined, but that you can write on paper just to say, oh, I want to be able to do X, Y, Z. The goal is something that you need to be able to share with everyone, in the sense that if it's something you're not really proud of, that's not really what is going to bring you happiness and something you are going to be able to consider yourself success later. If you're able to write this goal on paper, share it with everyone, and later achieve it, strive for it very hard, and in the end manage to find a way to make it happen, and that has a positive good for society, I think that's how I would define success.
If you had one piece of advice that you could give to our listeners, what would it be?
If something sounds crazy, but you like the outcome, do it. Do it. And I'm not someone who, again, I just turned 21. I do not have a crazy experience about life. So take anything I've said so far and what I'm saying now with a grain of salt. But I've never regretted doing something where people were saying, oh, this is crazy. Maybe don't do it because it's too risky. Let's do this or that. If you do it, even if it fails, it can still be a success in the sense that now you know. And what I dread the most in life, and again, to each his own, but what I dread the most in life is getting to a point where at some point I realized that I could have had taken the step of doing something crazy, and now I can't anymore. So whenever there's something crazy to do, you're only going to live once. If you can afford to take that risk, if it's not going to be a massive catastrophe, if it doesn't work out, do it. Even if people are saying, well, that's not in the normal path of things. The normal path is to do X, Y, Z, to take these classes, to go there, to follow this checklist of things that are going to make you successful. If you don't see yourself as successful in the end, that doesn't really count as success. And someone who ends up poor with absolutely zero regrets of all the crazy things they did, I don't think they're poor by their own metric. Even if society sees them as, oh, blah, blah, he didn't succeed because he, as President Sarkozy would say, does not have a Rolex at 40 years old. I don't know if that's the metric. He did quite decent for himself, but that is his metric. He had the crazy idea of, oh, I'm going to become president of France. Well, that's an example of doing something crazy. Not everyone wakes up in the morning thinking, I'm going to do this. He did the crazy thing, and that is, I think, the real success to tie everything back together.